If you knew that the whole planet depended on what you do now, would you take a man with the speed our times allow? If the pundits told the truth for just a week or two and real life was shown on TV?
Just know this is a report back in a way, but it's also a way to begin making connections, because a large part of the idea of the social forum is to make these connections and make them strong and make them mean something when people come back home.
If you knew the earth was dying, if they said this on the news, if they would clarify the picture instead of seeking to confuse, if you could see the ice caps melting, if you could watch the oceans rise, if you could see the consequences right before your eyes, if you knew the kids were dying, if you could look inside the river where their food comes from, filled with cyanide, if you could hear the parents pleading, if they were looking right at you, if you could see the anguish in their hearts. What if you knew? Knew the bombs were falling, if they showed them hit the ground, if you could see the bodies flying, if you could hear the sound, if you could see the rubble where the hospital once stood, if you saw the child's lifeless limbs, would you hold them if you could? If you knew that they were lying every time they spoke, for every laser-guided pinprick there were lives lost in the smoke, if instead of just the generals they had doctors too to describe the carnage of the cluster bombs. What if you knew? If you knew what they were saying when they think you cannot hear, if you understood what they do, if for you it was so clear, if you knew they shut down the factory in an economic ruse, if you could kiss the cheek of the child in the sweatshop that made your shoes, every time we went to war to fight our evil foes, they told you we were really fighting for the good of CEOs, if you could feel the hunger of the many, see the riches of the few, if they told it like it is. What if you knew?
Judith Rosenberg, Austin Tancerca de la Frontera. We've had our focus on Mexican labor very intensively for 10 years and making connections between workers here and workers there, U.S. labor, and the U.S. society at every level is affected by globalization, free trade, privatization, loss of the public sphere. It's an experience to go to the U.S. Social Forum that is uplifting, and it feels like for 4 days or 5 days, whatever it is, you can be in the world that's supposed to be. It's kind of a relief to be in a place where people are coming together from every section of society with such a diversity of focus on issues and trying to put it together and trying to make the world that we need. So our workshop there was to tell the world about Austin Tancerca de la Frontera and what we do and who we are as kind of a news organization that can bring to the United States at some level a truth and a reality about what's happening in Mexico that you just don't get other places. So what are we doing? For 10 years we've been developing a solidarity relationship with organized Mexican labor. Not necessarily a labor union. Our partners in Mexico are the Comité Fronterizo de Obreras y Obreros, the Border Committee of Women and Men Workers, abbreviated to the CFO. So that's a solidarity relationship of mutual support and mutual education, really, in a very deep sense, about deep differences in culture and economic situations and very different relationships to, in some ways, to corporate ways of organizing things. But it's also, Austin Tancerca is also a program of delegations, very structured, that 4 times a year brings people from Austin, but also all over the United States, to Mexico to learn with us and think with us about labor rights and human rights and how we can act in our own societies.
I'm also a founder of Austin Tancerca de la Frontera. This program was part of the American Friends Service Committee, but precisely because of the economic downturn, the office will have to close as of September 30th of next September, actually. So this year we have been working on becoming an independent organization as Austin Tan Cerca de la Frontera, and keeping the delegations program, which has something that we have learned through the years is that it has broadened not only on the delegations, but we touch also on the connections between border policies, immigration, militarization, and labor rights. So we try to make all these connections, and sometimes we have included visits to detention centers like the one in Raymondville, so that people can take a look at the connections between immigration, the border, and the maquiladora. We want to continue with what we call the Women and Fair Trade, which is this what we're wearing right now, which has come up also as part of the Austin Tan Cerca, because we have learned that even though Mexico, and particularly the border, is an example of labor injustices, mainly legalized, officialized, or normalized by NAFTA in 1994, even though that happened, workers have also have grown in the resistance, and a resistance that probably we don't hear about very much in the mainstream media, but a resistance that we, as the one taking delegations to the border and the ones that go with us, also have the opportunity to look at. We tend to think that the people we meet with are poor people, that they don't have education, that they can hardly make it, but when we get there and we learn from them and we share their meals and we share their stories, then our perceptions change. We don't go to teach them and let them know what they ought to do, but actually learning from them how they organize. And something that we have learned through the years is that the resistance strategies that they have come up with have been wonderful, such as creating a one-of-its-kind maquiladora, a worker-owned maquiladora called the Dignity and Justice Maquiladora, precisely where they do these T-shirts. And it's one of its kind, I think, and it's one of the alternatives with which people have come up with. So we thought that maybe that we could expand that through our Women and Fair Trade and invite other cooperatives also to join and to share also their stories during this event that we do every year by November. And one of the results of this Women and Fair Trade event is that people from the south of Mexico, from Chiapas, have come together with people from the north in the Dignity and Justice, and even with people from San Antonio, the Fuerza Unida Women in San Antonio, who are a grassroots organization who have been the laid-off workers of Levi's 20 years ago. So they got together and they put together this exchange program where they share skills, they share marketing possibilities, and actually they are coming this August 26th through the 31st. Two indigenous women from Chiapas who are weavers are coming to share their stories and to share their weavings and textiles with people in the north. So that's what we want to do. We want to build bridges among communities so that we enlarge this resistance and that we can make a reasonable life out of our daily living.